Hey, this is Max, and welcome to the Run System podcast. So today's episode is going to be on having favorites, favoritism. And more specifically, I'm talking about, like me personally, I don't feel like I have any favorite things. Music-wise, I listen to whatever's on. And, generally speaking, I do have a mood for specific things. Like I'll listen to hip-hop, I'll listen to, like soft pop, I'll listen to whatever, depending on how I feel in that particular moment. And like one of my major go-tos is just instrumentals. I'll listen to like classical, I'll listen to like hip hop beats, I'll listen to all kinds of just like beats and instrumentals just in the background because I don't really like having words in my music. I guess you could say that. I favor more not having words. And you can't really call that, my favorite genre because it's not really a genre, it's more of a type. And even aside from that, sometimes I do want, words. Sometimes I do want to have someone singing, and, it really just depends on my mood. And it's the same thing with like things like food. I don't have a favorite food. I don't have a favorite cuisine. Like I usually prefer Asian foods like Chinese or Vietnamese or Thai, but I'm not against eating Mediterranean. I love Mediterranean food. I love, like certain types of Italian food, certain types of American food. It just really depends on my mood. And that really kind of transcends to everything in my life because, I really don't have a favorite anything that I can think of. Like favorite colors, I like my grays, I like my reds, I like my blues, I like my darker tones. And, it's just, there's no real favorite for me, and I think having a favorite really limits you in terms of options. It really limits you, not like openly, not explicitly, but implicitly, like subconsciously, you're kind of limiting yourself to certain options. You're limiting yourself to what you can choose. If you have a favorite color, people are going to recognize that. People are going to understand that, and then they're going to get you things or like want to get you things or show you things that are that specific color. And then it kind of brings you down this road where it kind of maintains who you are. It's like a part of your identity. And personally, I don't want to do that. You guys know that I'm more open to things, and I'd prefer to have my options. I'd prefer to be able to expand and explore. And it again, it really just depends on how I feel that particular day or time period or season or whatever. And if you really kind of break it down, I do prefer certain things. I do prefer, like if you were talking about colors, I prefer my darker tones. I like my grays. I like my sort of like maroons, like sort of dark reds, my navies, things like that, my purples. And that, it opens up to more options in terms of, what I want to get or like what people get me, in terms of gifts, because then there's a variety of options, instead of just having just one set, like, oh, my favorite color is gray, right? And they only get me like gray tones. And yeah, sure, it's cool. I like gray, it's preferable for me, but I don't want everything I have to be gray. I don't want everything in my life to be gray. It's just that's not how it's supposed to work. At least in my mind. And same thing for like music. Same thing for like I don't have a favorite sport. I don't have a favorite fighter in terms of MMA. I don't really have a favorite game or activity or food. Again, it just it really depends on how I feel and like what I'm expressing that day, like that at that particular moment when they ask me that question. That's just how I feel. There's just not, for me, there's just not something that really represents who I am completely like that. And again, if you have a favorite, if you are someone that picks a lot of favorites, then by all means do it because that represents you. That's who you are. But for me, I just want to explain that, having a favorite, it really limits you in terms of your options, and it limits who you can express yourself as. And I don't like that. I don't like limitations on how I can be. I don't like limitations on where I'm supposed to go, and that's really kind of represented when someone says, what's your favorite whatever, what's your favorite color, what's your favorite music, what's your favorite blah, blah, blah. I don't like that question, and I don't really, I mean, I understand it. I understand where people are coming from with it. It's just a way to understand who you are. And for me, to understand who I am, you have to understand that I don't have favorites. I don't play favoritism. And that transcends to everything in my life. And another thing is that we change, we evolve as people, or at least we should. And we should constantly be adjusting. We should constantly be evolving and trying to be the best us that we can be. And sometimes that best us changes colors, changes, genre, changes, preferences in terms of, shows or like hobbies, whatever. And I find that happened to me because back when I was a kid, my favorite color was gray. And before that, it was purple. And before that, it was red. It's changed over time. And I remember for music, I loved, like heavy rock. That was my thing. It's alternate rock, all kinds of rock. And then it transitioned to hip hop. And then for a really long time, I listened to a lot of opera and a lot of classical, not knowing what I was listening to. It just sounded good to me. I didn't know what I was listening to. And then recently, it's been hip hop beats. It's been, just instrumentals. That's just what it's been. And, this happened for everything for me. When I started doing martial arts, I fell in love with striking. That was my thing. I didn't really want to grapple. I didn't really want to do that sort of quote unquote gay shit. It's not gay. It's probably like one of the best forms of martial arts you can do, especially for all ages, for everyone in the world. It's the best thing. And before, when I was younger, I thought striking was the best. I thought striking, I could show off my power, I could show off my speed, and I didn't need to be wrestling anyone, grappling anyone, that didn't need to be a thing. And then it transitioned to, yes, it was, that's my preferred thing. Like even subconsciously, I'm a grappler. Even, in terms of like what I would do in a situation like that, I would probably resort to wrestling to grappling. And that's what I mean. You evolve over time. And with that, so should your preferences, so should your favorites. Everything should change along with you. And if you limit yourself constantly to one thing, that's just what I realized, that you're limiting yourself. It may not be, forced upon you, but it is slowly limiting who you are. It is slowly limiting what you're capable of and what you can receive and all this jazz. It's just, I don't play favorites, and I feel, if you do play favorites, that's all on you. That's who you are. That's how you're represented. If your favorite color's been blue your entire life, good on you. You've found your clique, right? You've understood who you are at an early age, and we should all be so lucky. But for me, I prefer the freedom of not having favorites. I prefer the freedom of having just like broad sense general preferences. That's just who I am. That's what I prefer. And if you have something against that, so what? I don't really care, because that's just who I am. And to accept that, you have to accept who I am. That's just the bare bones of it. But like I said in this one episode, I had this episode on the topic of contradiction and how I contradict myself all the time. I'm gonna contradict myself here. I'm gonna say that while I don't have favorites, I do have this one or two things, like a few items within certain categories where I will say I'll never say no to it. I'll always recommend these. I'll always point to these, right? Like favorite colors. I prefer darker tones. I'm always going to point to darker tones. I'm never going to say no. If someone offered me a gift or someone offered me something with that color, I would never say no. If they offered me like, I don't know, if they bought me like a pair of gray pants, I'll never say no to it. If they bought me a pair of pink pants, I'd be like, pink's not really my color. That's just something that will happen. And in terms of music, someone's like, if we're driving down in a car, driving down the highway, and you ask me, what do you want to listen to? And I'll say whatever. And then if they say, I'm going to put on, hip hop, I'm going to put on pop, I'm not going to say no to it. But if they say, I'm going to put on, country, I'm going to put on like heavy metal, I might say no to that. If they're going to put on like freaking Irish folk music, I'm not entirely sure. If they offered me food, I'm never going to say no to Asian food. Like I said, I'm never going to say no to Mediterranean food. If you offered me like a burger and I'm not feeling it, I'm probably not going to eat it. If you offered me like French food, probably not going to eat it. I mean, I might, just because I'll eat everything, but if I'm not hungry at that particular moment, I might not eat it, right? And I do have preferences for certain things. I do prefer a certain thing. Like, let's go back to TV shows briefly. Do I have a favorite TV show? No, but I'll never not recommend watching something like How I Met Your Mother, like American Dad, like in terms of anime, Naruto. I'll never not recommend those. If it's on, I'm gonna watch it regardless. That's just how it is. Like movies, I'm never not gonna watch Inception. I'm never not gonna watch the Planet of the Apes series, like the new one. Rise, Dawn, and War. I'm never not gonna watch that trilogy. In terms of like sports, I'm never not gonna watch MMA. I may not watch football or American football or basketball, but I'll definitely watch MMA. I'll watch boxing. I'll watch wrestling. I'm gonna watch the combat sports because I prefer combat sports. I prefer those things that sort of revolve around my life. In terms of like other things, I'm gonna prefer certain things. Is what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna have things where I'm gonna point to and be like, I'll never say no. These are the things that, while they may not be my favorite overall, I do enjoy them, and I enjoy them more than everything else. I enjoy them. I enjoy this particular category, this particular subcategory or genre or whatever more than everything else. And I can't really explain why, I prefer certain things and I don't prefer other things. It brings out a certain emotion. It represents me in a certain way, right? Like in terms of food, I love Asian food because I am Asian. Chinese food, like it's just who I am. It's how I'm represented. There's a sense of nostalgia with it. Like for Vietnamese food, I'm gonna eat a bowl of pho because not only does it feel good to eat, but it's nostalgic, right? And like there's this particular dish that my mom makes. I'm not sure if it's like Chinese or whatever, but it's a particular dish that my mom makes. Spam and eggs. I love it. I'll never not eat it. Even if spam was like full of all these like additives and it's like highly processed, I don't really care. People always tell me like don't eat spam. I'm gonna eat it with eggs because it's a sense of nostalgia. It's not my favorite food, but I would never say no to that dish. I'll never say no to it. There's another dish like tomato fried rice. I'll never say no to that because there's a sense of nostalgia there. There's a sense of like belonging there that I'm never gonna be detached from. That's just who I am. That's how I was. That's where I came from, sort of. And like for music, it's more of an emotional thing, right? Like I'm gonna listen to these old school like 2000s beats, 2000s songs because it brings out all this memories, all these times back in my youth, back when I was a kid, of listening to these songs like Usher, like Neo, things like that, where I'm reminded of my past in a good way. And on top of that, I can attach myself to new things. I can feel more driven and emotional about new things because it's guiding me to the future. I'm living in the present to be pushed into the past with these old beats, with these old foods, with all these old preferences of mine. And then I'm pushed into the future with these newer things that I'm experiencing because I'm not limiting myself. That's just how I feel. I'm not limiting myself to having a favorite. Like if I stayed within that, alt rock genre, I would have never experienced someone like Lupe Fiasco. I've never experienced someone like Kendrick Lamar. If I stayed in that sort of Asian food only genre, then I would never experience Mediterranean food. I would never experienced, like Latin food, like Brazilian food. I would never experience that. And if I had stayed within the realm of only striking, only kickboxing, I would have never really experienced the beauty of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The pain and the glory and the joy of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've never experienced that. And without that, I would have never experienced, things like Sambo, things like MMA. I would have never experienced those things. And I can safely say that it's because I didn't choose it as my favorite. I didn't choose it to be the one guiding factor of my life. And again, I'm not saying if you have favorites, that's how you live. I'm just saying for me, that's what would happen if I did. That's what would happen if I chose favorites. I would stick with it. It would maintain throughout my entire life as my favorite. It wouldn't change. Nothing would change. And to me, that's not living. You have to evolve. You have to evolve. You have to grow. You have to share. And you have to expand. You have to change your preferences. You have to change your likes and dislikes. And you can't hold favorites. That's just how I feel. That's just how I understand the world, or at least my world as it is. And remember, I said earlier that when I was younger, that's how I wasn't. I was exactly the opposite of what I am now. I would have a lot of favorites. I would choose this or that. I would limit myself. I would close the door to certain options. And as I grow older, I realize that it's much better to open those doors. It's much better to have those options. And this sort of tags along with the previous episode, episode 64, hate. You know, I can't say that I hate anything, right? I can't say that I hate particular genre of music. Like earlier I said, probably wouldn't listen to country. I probably wouldn't listen to Irish folk. There are good country songs. There are good Irish folk songs. There are good heavy metal songs. And I will listen to them. But that doesn't mean I hate those, it doesn't mean I'll listen to it all the time. It doesn't mean that just because I don't listen to it all the time or don't prefer to listen to it, that I hate it. That's just not how it works, right? Like I said, if someone gave me gray pants, then yes, I would love it. But if someone gave me pink pants, then I'd be iffy about it, but I'd still take it because not only is it a gift, but pink is a good color. Pink is a great color, and you never know when the situation will arise where you need pink, right? And in terms of sports, I'll watch football. I'll watch whatever if it's on and it's interesting. That's just how it works. If other movies are on besides the Planet of the Apes trilogy or like Inception, I'm gonna watch it. There's good movies out there that are great. Like comedy movies. I don't really prefer to watch comedy movies, but there are some comedy movies that are pure gold, like the original Hangover. I love that movie. Some people don't, but I do. And typically I don't watch those comedy movies. Like I don't like Adam Sandler and his movies because I just don't find him funny. But there are certain movies of his that are great. They're classics, like Longest Yard. It's a classic. Click, that's a classic. Even like the newer movies like Hotel Transylvania series, those are great. Those are funny movies. And again, I'm not saying that I hate Adam Sandler or his movies or anything. I don't. I just don't prefer them. I don't really like them as much as I would like something else. And that's what I'm saying here. You can't limit yourself, because if you have a favorite, at least in my mind, at least in my opinion, in my experience, if you have a favorite, you have something that's the opposite. You have something that's a polar, right? You have something that's against it, sort of. And, I don't like having those sort of a binary system in your life. I don't like having that this or that system. And even if you don't think you do, in my mind, choosing a favorite does do that to you. It does create this sense of a binary world. It does create the sense of this or that. And I don't like that. I like living in this sort of gray area. I know I said gray doesn't revolve around my life, but it kind of does, because a lot of people see the world black and white. But you got to see it gray. You got to see it open. You have to see it sort of everything, right? Like it just has to be everything. And so, I try and leave a moral in every story of mine. I try and leave like sort of like this thing, like a takeaway from all of my episodes. And this takeaway is, for me, I don't think you should have favorites. I don't think you should have sort of this one set thing or even just a couple of set things. It should be a preference of a field, a preference of a broad term, like a preference of a general area, a general genre, a general subcategory. That's how it should be. Because your life, you're going to constantly evolve, you're going to constantly change, and you have to grow with your ideals and with your preferences, right? And your preferences will change according to you, because it's a symbiotic relationship. Plain and simple, just don't have favorites. I think that limits you. I think that limits you in terms of your options. You should be open to a bunch of options. You should be expansive in what you want and what you prefer. And it should be open. No favorites. That's just how I think of the world. That's how I think you should live your life. But on top of that, if you don't think that way, if you do have favorites, good on you. Again, you've discovered what you are and who you are early, and you should maintain that. But I'm just saying, as humans, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing, and you should consider that. But either way, if you have favorites or if you don't, and you're listening here, I want to thank you, because you're here listening. And if you're new and you want to hear more, check out more at RoninSystem.com. If you have an Instagram, follow me on Instagram at the Ronin System, no spaces. If you want to directly support me, Patreon, the Ronin System. It's all the Ronin System, guys. And there have been people that have asked me, where can I get links? Where can I get, something like shareable links? you can find this podcast anywhere you listen to anything, right? It's all media. Like Apple Podcasts is the biggest go-to, Google Podcasts as well, Spotify, even Pandora, you know. And if you have people that you want to share a link with, just send them directly to the website, therunnitsystem.com. It's not a great website, but it's a start, you know. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you to the particular people out there that have given their support by at least spreading the word. You know, all this couldn't be done without you guys, because there wouldn't be an audience and there wouldn't be people that are willing to share. You know, that's the biggest thing. I'm trying to share with you guys and hope that you guys will share with others. You know, that's the biggest thing here. But regardless, thank you so much for listening. Have an amazing day. Get out there, get hungry, and good luck.